Shadows of Britain, Gibbet Hill, where the road learned fear. When traveling along the A386 between Okehampton and Tavistock, the road slips beneath a vast rounded dome of land. A hill that looks peaceful at first glance, almost protective in its scale. Heather and grass roll gently across its slopes, skylarks rise above it, and the moor stretches wide in every direction. But this hill has never been innocent. On most maps it is known as Gibbet Hill. In older memory it was Gallows Hill, and for centuries it was a warning. Long before engines and tarmac, this route was one of the busiest crossings of Dartmoor. Coaches labored uphill, wagons creaked under weight. Riders, drovers, merchants, and pedestrians all passed beneath this hill, funneling through a landscape that offered shelter and danger. Dartmoor was a perfect place for ambush. It was said that notorious highwaymen stalked this stretch of road names, whispered rather than spoken openly. Among them were Captain Jack and Dick Rawley, figures who lived by the pistol and the blade, and died by the law. According to local history, Dick Rawley was the last highwayman to be executed on the gibbet here, finally captured while hiding in one of the old mining pits at Wheelbetsy Mine. The hill took its name from what followed. In 1751, the Murder Act gave judges new powers. Execution was no longer enough. The law demanded spectacle. Criminals, especially murderers, sheep stealers, and highwaymen, were to be made examples of even in death. This is where the gibbet came in. A gibbet was not always a gallows. Sometimes it was worse. In one form, it was a simple upright post with an arm extended at 90 degrees. From it, the corpse of the executed criminal was hung in chains and left to rot in full view of the public. Flesh decayed, bones blackened, ravens gathered. The body remained until wind, weather, and scavengers finished the job. In other cases, the gibbet took the form of an iron cage. A living man was placed inside. The cage was raised high, and he was left there. No shelter, no mercy, no release. Death came slowly through hunger, thirst, exposure, or madness. Gibbets were never hidden. They were placed where they would be seen by everyone. Crossroads, hilltops, and roadsides. Their purpose was not justice but fear, and Gibbet Hill was the perfect site. From its summit, anything raised there would have been visible for miles, a dark shape against the sky, looming over the busy route below. Every traveler would have looked up. Every child would have been warned. Every criminal would have understood the price. Yet even now there is uncertainty over what stood here. Some say it was only a post bearing the dead. Others insist there was an iron cage, and that the hill's name remembers something far worse. Do it. Local tradition speaks of the Iron Catch Gate, once found at two possible locations on the hill. Some believe this marked the route to the gibbet itself. Others say the gate led to the cage, that prisoners were held there first, before being taken up to the summit to face their end. The truth has rusted away with the iron, but the stories remain. The Dartmoor historian William Crossing recorded what the locals still whispered. Tales are related in the neighborhood of unfortunate wretches being confined there in an iron cage and left to die as a punishment for their crimes on the highway. One tale tells of a man who survived far longer than expected. Villagers, uneasy but not unkind, brought him scraps of food. It is said that his hunger became so desperate that when nothing else was offered, he devoured candles, gnawing at wax simply to quiet the pain inside him. Another story is darker still. A criminal left too long began to starve. In his madness, he is said to have eaten the flesh from his own arms, driven beyond reason by hunger and despair. And then there is the most unsettling tale of all, that a condemned man was placed in the cage and left to die of thirst, and that his mother, unable to watch her son perish, breastfed him through the bars to keep him alive. Whether truth or myth, the story has endured, passed from generation to generation like a wound that never quite healed. Crossing also records that Gibbet Hill was said to be the place where the infamous Lady Howard was burned, another shadow layered onto an already blackened site. Today there is nothing left. No cage, no post, no chains. At the summit of the hill stands only a trig pillar, cold and precise, measuring a landscape that once measured human suffering instead. The wind moves freely now. The ravens still come, but they perch on stone, not bone. And yet, Dartmoor does not forget. Some say that on quiet days when the mist rolls low and the traffic fades, the sound of chains can still be heard, clanking softly where nothing hangs. Others claim that a spectral highwayman appears near the road, a dark figure watching travelers pass, sometimes named as Captain Jack, condemned to pace the hill he once ruled. Whether ghost or memory, the feeling remains. Gibbet Hill was built to be remembered, to loom, to warn, and even now as cars pass beneath it without slowing, the hill still does its work. Because some places are not haunted by spirits. They are haunted by what people were once willing to do, and by how publicly they were willing to. Shadows of Britain. The Cornish wreckers of the North Coast. Along the Cornwall North Coast, the land ends abruptly. Cliffs rise hard from the Atlantic, torn and undercut by centuries of storms. Below them, the sea does not arrive. It assaults. Waves break like artillery. Wind strips sound from the air. Fog rolls in without warning, swallowing distance, light, and hope. This coastline was never forgiving, and once it was feared for far more than the weather. Before lighthouses burned steady and charts were reliable, the north coast of Cornwall was a graveyard in waiting. Ships from Ireland, Wales, Spain, and the Americas passed close inshore, running dangerous routes to save time and avoid tax. At night, in bad weather, they trusted what little guidance they could find. Sometimes, they trusted the wrong light. The people who lived here knew the coast better than any sailor ever could. They knew the reefs, the coves, the sudden shelves of rock that could tear a hull open in seconds. They knew where a ship would strike if pushed just a little off course, and they knew what came after. Wrecking did not always begin as murder. For generations, coastal communities survived on whatever the sea surrendered. When a ship was broken by storm, its cargo was considered a gift from God, as some put it. Timber, barrels, cloth, rum, tobacco, even food washed ashore. To take it was not theft. It was survival. But stories persist, dark ones, of a line crossed, of false lights shown on headlands, of lanterns tied to grazing animals bobbing and swaying like a ship at anchor, of sailors steering toward what they believed was safety, only to meet rock. Whether every tale is true matters less than this. Enough people believed them to make the coast a place of terror. When a ship struck, chaos followed. Waves smashed hulls apart. Men were thrown into black water battered against stone. Those who reached shore often did not find rescue. Instead, some found silence. Others found violence. Local folklore speaks of survivors clubbed or drowned to prevent claims on cargo, of hands cut away to steal rings, of bodies dragged above the tide line so that no life was saved, because a saved life complicated ownership. Official records rarely admit to such acts, but fear has its own memory, and the memory of this coast is long. Certain places became synonymous with loss. Near Godrevy, ships vanished with frightening regularity before the lighthouse was built. Around Zenor, the cliffs offer no mercy, sheer drops where sound is torn away by wind, and cries would never reach the village above. Along the entire north coast, small coves provided perfect cover, close enough to retrieve cargo, hidden enough to avoid witnesses. Storm nights were watched carefully, not prayed through, waited for. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the reputation of the Cornish coast had reached Parliament. Investigations were launched. Laws were tightened. Lighthouses rose from rock that had once been used to lure ships to destruction. Wrecking did not stop overnight, but it changed. And with change came something else. Guilt. Stories began to circulate of consequences, of phantom bells heard in storms, ringing from beneath the waves where a church had once stood, or so people claimed. Of lights moving along the cliffs when no one was there, of screams carried on the wind, rising and falling with the surf. Some said the sea itself remembered, that it returned what it had taken, not in timber or cargo but in sound. Even now the north coast feels watchful. Modern visitors speak of unease near the cliff edges, of the sense of being observed from behind, of footsteps on paths that suddenly stop when turned toward, of the strange instinct to move away from certain viewpoints without knowing why. On calm days the sea looks inviting. On storm days it reveals its teeth. And in the spaces between, when mist closes in and the horizon dissolves, it is easy to understand how fear once ruled this edge of land. The wreckers are gone. The lanterns are regulated. The cliffs are fenced. The lights are fixed and honest. But the coast has not softened. It still breaks ships. It still keeps secrets. And when the wind howls along the rocks and the surf pounds the coves below, the sound feels rehearsed, as if the land is repeating something it learned long ago. Because some places are shaped by survival, and some are shaped by what people were willing to do when survival was on the line. Along Cornwall's north coast, the sea does not forget, and neither does the land that once watched ships come apart. Piece by piece, in the dark,